Most people think betrayal is personal, that it comes from jealousy, anger, emotion. But the most dangerous kind of betrayal is the one that's planned, signed off, proved, and executed like a business decision. I didn't realize they had left me behind until the signal disappeared. Not slowly, not gradually, completely. It was 2:17 in the morning, cold enough that the air felt sharp every time I breathed in. The kind of silence you only get in places where people don't stay out late, 'cause they know better. I was standing outside a temporary operations building, waiting for a response that never came. Phone in hand. Green lit. No service. First I thought it was infrastructure. Network instability. Power fluctuation. We were operating in a high-risk zone. That kind of disruption wasn't unusual. But then I checked the backup line. Nothing. Satellite channel. That's when something shifted. Not panic. Not fear. Recognition. Because systems don't all fail at once. Unless someone turns them off. My name is Ivara Quinn Hale. And for the past 9 years, I was the person companies sent when they needed to operate in places they weren't supposed to fail. High-risk markets. Unstable regulatory environments. Regions where one wrong move could cost millions. Or worse. I didn't just assess risk. Controlled it. Which is why what happened that night wasn't an accident. It was a decision. But before I continue, where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments. I always want to know how far these stories reach. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like and subscribe so this channel can keep growing and bringing you more. By 2:23 a.m., I stopped trying to reconnect. 'Cause by then, I understood something most people wouldn't catch until it was too late. They hadn't lost contact with me. They had cut it. Deliberately. And in that moment, standing alone in a place I was never meant to stay in, I realized something else. I wasn't just out of contact. I had been left behind. And whatever they thought would happen next, they were counting on one thing. That I wouldn't make it back. What they didn't know was that I had already started documenting everything. Because if there's one thing I learned growing up, and one thing I built my entire career on, it's this. When people try to erase you, you don't disappear. You come back. With proof. I didn't end up in places like that by accident. No one does. I was born on August 3, 1990, in Boise, Idaho. Not the version people imagine when they think of risk or strategy or corporate warfare. Just a quiet city. Predictable streets. Early sunsets. The kind of place where nothing feels urgent. Unless you know where to look. My father did. He worked in military intelligence before he retired. He never talked about specifics. Never told stories. But he trained me without calling it training. He would pause movies halfway through and ask me what I thought would happen next. Not the obvious outcome. The hidden one. Who benefits? Who disappears? What's the move no one is paying attention to? 12 I thought it was a game. At 16 I realized it was a framework. My mother operated differently. She worked in corporate compliance, contracts, internal investigations. The kind of work that only mattered after something had already gone wrong. She didn't teach me how to predict. She taught me how to prove. Documentation. Language. The difference between what happened and what you can demonstrate happened. Between the two of them, I didn't just grow up observant. I grew up precise. By the time I left for Georgetown at 18, I already understood something most people don't learn until much later. Systems don't protect you. They protect themselves. I studied international business and risk analysis. Not because it was interesting. 'Cause it was useful. While other students focused on expansion strategies and growth models, focused on failure points, regulatory gaps, cross-border liabilities, the quiet places where companies make decisions they don't want documented. That's where the real leverage exists. I graduated at the top of my program. Not loudly, not publicly, but in a way that got noticed by the right people. My first job wasn't glamorous. Junior analyst at a risk advisory firm based in DC. Low visibility. High exposure. I wasn't the one presenting to clients. I was the one building the reports they relied on. Mapping threats. Identifying inconsistencies. Flagging issues that hadn't surfaced yet. Within a year I stopped being just an analyst. I became the person they consulted before things went wrong. By 26, I was already being sent on site. Not to safe markets, to unstable ones. Eastern Europe, parts of Central Asia, regions where regulations changed overnight. And enforcement depended on who you knew. I learned how to move carefully, how to read rooms where no one said what they meant, how to understand when a deal wasn't just business, but something layered underneath. And most importantly, I learned how to document everything, not just formally, but quietly. Patterns, conversations, decisions that didn't align with what was written on paper. Because in environments like that, the truth rarely lives in official records. By the time I turned 30, I had built a reputation, not public, not visible, but inside certain circles. My name meant one thing. If something was about to go wrong, I would see it first, which is exactly why they chose me for that assignment. It came in late October. A message marked priority. A new expansion project. A value. A risk. A region with unstable oversight. And too much money moving too quickly. The kind of project where everything looks legitimate, until you start asking the right questions. I reviewed the initial brief in under 20 minutes. On paper it made sense. Clean structure. Strong financial projections. Solid local partnerships. But something about it felt too aligned. Too smooth. Like the kind of deal that had already been approved. Before anyone verified if it should be. Still I accepted. 'Cause assignments like that don't come randomly. They're chosen. And whether I realized it then or not, I hadn't been selected just for my skill set. I had been selected 'cause I was useful. And in companies like that, being useful is only valuable until it becomes dangerous. The assignment didn't feel dangerous at first. That's how these things usually work. Everything looked structured. Clear objectives. Defined timelines. Team that on paper made sense. We deployed in early November. Arrival logged at 1842 local time. A small regional hub. Functional but not built for long-term operations. Temporary offices. Limited infrastructure. Just enough stability to support something that wasn't meant to stay visible for long. There were 5 of us on site. Myself. 2 operations leads. Legal liaison. And Elliot Varnek, the project director. Elliot was the kind of executive who didn't need to prove authority. He assumed it. Voice. Minimal explanation. The type of presence that keeps people from asking the questions they should be asking. First, nothing stood out. We followed protocol. Initial assessments. Local partner evaluations. Regulatory mapping. But within the first week, the details started shifting. Not in ways that would trigger alarms. Just enough to feel misaligned. November 9th. Our scheduled compliance review with a local regulatory contact was cancelled. Last minute. No reschedule. The explanation was simple. Scheduling conflict. That happens. But what didn't happen was a follow-up. In projects like this, regulatory alignment is priority 1. You don't skip it. You don't delay it. It's already been handled. Or intentionally avoided. The second shift came 3 days later. November 12, 2218. I was reviewing internal transaction flows tied to the expansion structure. Routine. Cross-checking financial pathways against declared operational needs. That's when I saw it. A routing inconsistency. Funds moving through an intermediary entity that wasn't listed in the original documentation. Not large amounts. Not obvious. But enough to matter. Flagged it. Documented it. Sent a request for clarification. The response came back the next morning. Already reviewed. No issue. No supporting detail. No explanation. Just closure. That was the moment the assignment stopped being routine. Because in my experience, when something is dismissed that quickly, it's not because it's harmless. It's because it's not supposed to be examined. By mid-November, communication started changing, not disappearing, refining. Dates became shorter. Decisions became faster. Discussions moved out of formal channels. Meetings happened without full attendance. Information was still being shared, just not equally. And that's the kind of shift most people miss. 'Cause everything still looks functional, but it's not transparent anymore. November 17th, I noticed the first direct exclusion. A strategy call scheduled for 1400 hours. Marked leadership only. I wasn't included. That on its own wasn't unusual. But the outcome of that call affected areas I was directly responsible for. Operational adjustments, compliance thresholds, risk tolerances, all changed. Without input, without review, without documentation. That's when I stopped operating as part of the team and started operating as an observer, quietly. I didn't challenge decisions, didn't escalate concerns, because escalation requires trust. And by then, I had already started questioning where that trust actually existed. The final signal came on November 21st. Early morning, 6:32. We were scheduled to visit a secondary site, one that hadn't been included in the original scope. No clear reason for the visit. No formal briefing. Just a directive. Be ready. We move at 7 o'clock. Something about it felt off. Not the task. Timing. The lack of structure. The absence of detail. Before we left, I checked the internal logs one more time. And that's when I noticed something. That shouldn't have been possible. Communication entry. Timestamped 3:11 a.m. Marked as executed, but not visible in the standard channel. Someone had made a decision in the middle of the night and intentionally kept it out of the system. That's when everything aligned. Not completely, but enough. The cancelled meetings, the restricted access, the rerouted funds, the selective communication. This wasn't mismanagement. It was coordination. And whatever they were building wasn't meant to survive scrutiny. I didn't confront anyone, 'cause by then, I understood something critical. If I was starting to see the pattern, then I was already too close to it. And in environments like that, being too close doesn't make you valuable, makes you expendable. The morning of November 21st didn't feel like a turning point. That's the part that stays with you. There was no warning, no dramatic shift in tone, just movement. We left at exactly 7:03. 2 vehicles. Minimal conversation. Standard formation. Elliot was in the lead car. I was in the second along with one of the operations leads. No briefing beyond location coordinates. No stated objective. The drive took just over an hour. We moved away from the central district, past the areas with consistent infrastructure, into zones where the roads narrowed and the signal became unreliable. By 8:11 we lost primary network access. Not unusual, but earlier than expected. The site itself wasn't operational. Not in the way it should have been. No visible staff. No structured entry process. No active compliance presence. Just a partially developed facility. And too many unanswered questions. Elliot didn't explain. He gave instructions. Short. Controlled. Initial assessment. Keep it brief. We split. Standard procedure. Each of us assigned to review different sections of the facility. I moved through the interior slowly. Not because I was cautious. 'Cause I was observing. There were inconsistencies everywhere. Documentation that didn't match physical layout. Equipment that had been installed, but not registered. Areas that looked recently accessed, without corresponding logs. This wasn't a new site. It was a modified one. At 9:02, I documented my third discrepancy. At 9:07, I tried to log it into the system. Connection unstable. By 9:11 gone. Still not alarming. Just inconvenient. But then something else shifted. Silence. Not environmental. Operational. The kind of silence that happens when coordination stops. No check-ins. No updates. No movement between team members. At 9:18, I stepped outside to re-establish line of sight. The vehicles were gone. Not repositioned. Not out of view. At first, I assumed a miscommunication. Relocation. Secondary checkpoint. Waited. 5 minutes. In. At 9:31, I attempted contact. Primary line. No response. Secondary. Nothing. At 9:36, I checked the backup device. Not disconnected. Disabled. That's when the realization didn't just form. Settled. This wasn't an extraction error. It was an exclusion. I wasn't forgotten. I was removed. The timeline made sense immediately. The early morning directive. The undocumented decision at 3:11. The lack of briefing. This location had never been part of the operation. It was the end point. For me. I didn't panic. Because panic assumes there's still a way back through the same system. And I already knew. There wasn't. Instead I shifted. From participant. To independent. First priority. Stabilize. I checked the perimeter. Identified access points. Marked potential observation risks. Second priority. Information. I went back inside. Because if they had left me there, it wasn't just to remove me. It was to contain something. And whatever that something was still inside that building. By 10:12 I found the first piece. A local ledger. Not digital. Physical. Hidden inside a storage compartment that wasn't listed on any structural plan. The entries were coded. But not well enough. Transaction dates. Amounts. References to entities that hadn't appeared in any official documentation. This wasn't oversight. This was a parallel system. At 11:04 I found the second. Terminal. Fine. But not wiped. Someone had accessed it recently. And in their urgency, they hadn't finished clearing it. Partial files remained. Fragments. But fragments are enough. When you know how to reconstruct them. By 13:26, I understood the scope. Not everything. But enough. Unauthorized financial routing. Undisclosed partnerships. Regulatory bypasses structured to look compliant. Until examined closely. And one more thing. Internal names. Not just local operators. Corporate. People who weren't supposed to be connected to this at all. That's when the situation shifted again. Not externally. Internally. Because at that point, this wasn't just about being left behind. It was about why. They hadn't removed me to protect the operation. They had removed me because I would have documented it. And now, already had. The sun was already dropping by the time I stepped back outside. No signal. No transport. No support. But something had changed. Not the environment. My position in it. Because I wasn't just isolated anymore. I was holding something. They couldn't afford to have exist. And that meant one thing. If I stayed there, I wasn't a liability. I was a risk. And risk. Get eliminated. So I didn't wait for them to come back. I started planning how to leave. On my terms. The moment you understand you've been left behind, survival becomes a strategy. Not instinct. Not luck. Structure. By 16:10 the temperature had already started dropping. Visibility fading. Movement outside becoming riskier with every passing hour. Had two options. Stay inside. And wait for something I knew wasn't coming. Or move. Before someone realized I was still alive. Chose movement. But not immediately. Because leaving without control is just another form of exposure. First I secured what mattered. The ledger. Photographed. Page by page. Then stored in two separate formats. The terminal data. Extracted manually. Compressed. Encrypted. And then, duplicated. One copy stayed with me. The other hidden. Not in a place someone would search. in a place someone would overlook. Because if I didn't make it out, the information still needed to exist. By 1702 I stepped outside. The road we came in on was no longer an option. Too exposed. Too predictable. So I moved in the opposite direction. Toward the edge of the site. Where infrastructure gave way to something less defined. Unmarked terrain. Partial development. Disconnected access routes. Not efficient, but harder to track. Every step had to be calculated. No signal meant no tracking. But also no support. No navigation system. No confirmation points. Just memory. And direction. By 1814 I reached the outer perimeter. Not secured. Which told me something important. This place wasn't meant to keep people out. It was meant to keep operations unseen. Beyond it was distance and uncertainty. The first hour was quiet. No movement behind me. No visible surveillance. Which didn't mean I was safe. It meant I hadn't been prioritized yet. That changed at 1932. I saw lights. Not stationary. Moving. Low. Deliberate. Search pattern. They had realized. That point. Speed mattered less than direction. Because if they were searching, they already knew where I had been. What they didn't know was where I was going. So I changed course. Not away from them. Cross them. Breaking expected movement patterns. Moving through terrain that slowed visibility. Forcing them to lose alignment. By 2106, the temperature had dropped further. Breath visible. Movement heavier. But the distance between us had widened. 2218 I found what I needed. Secondary access road. Unmarked. Lightly used. But functional. I didn't wait. 'Cause waiting would close the window I had just created. The vehicle wasn't locked. It didn't need to be. Places like that don't rely on security systems. They rely on isolation. Check fuel. Enough. Ignition. No hesitation. By 2223, I was moving. No headlights at first. Too visible. Just momentum. Distance. Direction. By the time I reached the first connected route, it was already past midnight. And for the first time since 9:18 that morning, I had something close to control again. But escape wasn't the victory. Not yet. Because survival only matters if you bring something back with you. And I had more than enough. The ledger. The files. Names. Not assumptions. Proof. By the time I crossed back into a stable network zone, I didn't reconnect immediately. Because reconnecting would alert them. Instead, I prepared. Structured the data. Organized the evidence. Mapped the connections. Because when I came back, it wouldn't be to explain what happened. It would be to show it. Completely. Undeniably. They thought leaving me behind would erase the problem. What they didn't understand was that all they had done was remove the only person who would have kept it contained. And now, everything they tried to hide was coming with me. I didn't go public right away. That's the mistake people make. They think truth is powerful on its own. It's not. Not until it's structured. I waited 3 days. Long enough to stabilize. Short enough that they wouldn't have time to fully contain the damage. During those 3 days, I didn't rest. Built a case. Every file I pulled from that terminal. Cross-referenced. Every entry in the ledger. Translated and aligned. Every name. Placed exactly where it belonged in the structure. Because information alone doesn't destroy anything. Connection does. By the time I was done, this wasn't a story. It was a system. One that showed exactly how money moved. How decisions were made. And who had signed off on all of it. I didn't send it to the company. That would have given them control. I sent it to the people they couldn't control. External compliance bodies. Regulatory authorities. Independent auditors tied to cross-border operations. And one investigative contact, who knew exactly how to make complex information impossible to ignore. The first response came in less than 12 hours. Not public, not loud, but internal. audit requests, emergency reviews, immediate suspensions of ongoing activity in that region. By the end of the week, escalated, operations frozen, financial channels flagged, partnerships placed under review, and the people involved, they didn't disappear. They were identified, one by one. Elliot Varnek was among the first, not because he was the highest level, because he was the most exposed, the one who had direct oversight, the one who signed off on field decisions, the one who made the call to leave me behind. He tried to contain it. Internal statements, controlled messaging, carefully worded explanations. But those only work when there's no evidence, and I had already removed that option. Within 2 weeks, he was gone, not reassigned, not repositioned, removed. The others followed, not all at once, but consistently, because once a system is exposed, it doesn't collapse in a moment. It unravels. Projects shut down, partnerships dissolved, entire divisions placed under investigation, and the expansion they had pushed so aggressively terminated completely. I was contacted more than once, requests for statements, clarifications, opportunities to resolve the situation privately. I declined all of them because there was nothing left to resolve. They had already made their decision, and I had responded to it. Months later, everything looked normal again. From the outside, new leadership, restructured operations, carefully repaired reputation. But underneath it, the damage remained, not visible, but permanent. And me, I didn't return to the company, didn't try to reclaim anything, because I wasn't interested in going back to a system that had already shown me exactly what it was. Instead, I built something different. Advisory work. Independent. Focused on one thing. Making sure situations like that don't stay hidden. Not loudly, not publicly, but effectively. Because in the end, this was never about revenge. It was about correction. They thought leaving me behind would erase the risk. What they didn't understand was that I was never the risk. I was the only thing keeping it contained. So if you were in my position, what would you have done? Would you have tried to survive quietly and walk away? Or would you have come back with everything they tried to bury? Write your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can keep growing and bringing you more stories like this.